I'm born and raised in Los Angeles. My family is from Ecuador. My mom is Spanish Lebanese. My dad is Spanish. They were born in Ecuador. I was born here, or not here, but I live in LA, but I'm currently in Ecuador till tomorrow. And I went to high school in LA to an all boys school called Loyola. It's a Jesuit school. And then I went to USC where I studied entrepreneurship at the Marshall School. It was a business with an emphasis in entrepreneurship. And then I started my clothing company while I was in college. That brand is called 5-4, and then it eventually became into a apparel holding company called the 5-4 Group. So we have about 9 brands in the space. I grew up with a pretty diverse kind of set of friends and exposure to, people, places, food, jokes, music, whatever, et cetera, which I think was super critical in my development and evolution. So, being in LA, you're exposed to all kinds and types of people. And obviously, it's a very forward thinking culture. I started my journey as an entrepreneur when I was 21. So I graduated college in 2002 and I started 5-4. We maxed out like 7 credit cards, went to this trade show called the Magic Trade Show, which was like a big apparel convention. And we did that for like, 2 years, struggled. And then we got an investor on board. And then really like, the brand took off in like 2005, rode the waves of, like the jean craze. And we did something that was very revolutionary and like in fit and design with denim is that we had like a relaxed top with like a tapered bottom. So we had a lot of traction and more of like they call like the men's urban market and also the adult market. Adult meaning like older men in their 40s that had like bigger thighs and like slimmer legs. And we rode that wave, and then 2008 hit, which was like our depression or our recession, I mean. And then we pivoted into retail, and around the same time we launched a brand called Young and Reckless. That was more of an opportunity that came to our plate because a friend of ours was working with Rob Dyrdek from the Fantasy Factory, and his cousin was on the show. His name is Drama, and they wanted to launch a brand. So we partnered with Drama, and then we were able to integrate the brand itself into the show. And this was like fall 2009 that the brand launched, and that day was when the show debuted that night. It was the #1 most Google search term in North America, and we did like a ton online and all that stuff. And this was a fall 09, so not all the resources that exist today were available then. Like Shopify is not what it is now, right? So we wrote that, and then in 2012 or in 2011, I started seeing kind of some things going on in the subscription space, and I had come across a brand called Shoedazzle that a family friend of mine's was involved, and he brought on Kim Kardashian to be a co-founder, and we had spoken to him and to Kim, just very super high level about the concept, because our store was very close to their booth at a mall in LA, and we are like, oh, that's super interesting. So then, I just kind of started kind of toying around, and I built together this model for a subscription service that I felt was needed in the men's space, because as opposed to females that like to discover and all that stuff, men, I realized, did not like to discover, and a lot of men just like fashion to be made very easy. I created this concept that launched in May of 2012, which is almost like 10 years ago, which is crazy. At that time, it was called the 5-4 Club. And then the premise was that, you get like 2 pieces of clothing a month, and then every month we give you new items, and we complement your closet over a year. And the first day we got like 1,200 members. So we are like, oh shit, there's something here. And we weren't really doing anything crafty for digital marketing, right? So about a year and a half, we went off of viral growth and all that stuff. And then I want to say fall of 13, we started investing into Facebook. And this is when Facebook, all you guys work in digital marketing. So this is when Facebook was dirt cheap. The CPAs were so low. You were just competing with startups as opposed to competing with like the behemoths. So we were able to ride that wave from like 13, I want to say like 16, 17, where on a big month, we were spending, $2 million a month. on growth. And then during that time, we launched a bunch of other ancillary brands that we felt that complemented kind of the offering that we provided in the subscription service, along with creating brands that we felt had a white space in the men's fashion space. Some worked, some did not work. But a couple of the ones that did work, one is called New Republic. That's a shoe brand that launched in 2016. Um, that and that's still around today, and it became the second or the third biggest brand in the portfolio, apart from 5-4 and Young and Reckless. Then we launched an active brand called Grand Running Club, and then we launched one other brand that did not make it in eyewear, and then that launched for just like 6 months or so, and then we put a hold on like a men's beauty brand, and we realized that like a lot of to launch brands, as you guys know, it's very hard. And a lot of times in like the digital space specifically, it's pretty founder dependent when you're at a certain level. And if you don't have the same energy and the same drive and passion and execution from the top down, it becomes very hard to be able to make each individual brand successful. So each of those brands had, you know, failures to mild to great successes. Some of the successes were attributed to either, good product, great price, um, good kind of branding, but throughout that time and space, we realized that like some things work, some did not work. So we, scaled down in terms of like not doing what did not work anymore, and then focusing on what did work. So that's kind of like the journey of 5-4 Group, and this year's our 20th year in business. I was the CEO of the company until about 3.5 years back, and then about 2 years back, I left completely. I'm still involved. I'm still an owner. I'm on the board and whatnot, but my co-founder runs a business. So I'm now focused more on CPG, particularly in beverage, and that's why when we started the call, my background, which is not fake, it's real, was the thing that prompted the question and all that stuff.
What drove you to create your first business? Talk about like some of the challenges and heart pains.
A lot of times when you go out and do your own thing, it really boils down to you kind of seeing something that you want from yourself and that it's not available in the market, right? So for instance, like, I've always been obsessed with clothing since I was a little kid. And, at Loyola, we had free dress and free dress was like non-jeans and non-t-shirts. So like I would always like swag off with like the hot Ralph Lauren and Tommy Hilfiger. And how we actually know each other, Pierre, Reggie, Jackson, and we used to like literally swag off to each other. Right. And, I would always come in on Mondays, like fresh from the mall with like the new fit. And I had this job in high school at Baskin Robbins that I took when I was 16. I literally spent my whole paycheck on clothes, at like literally Ralph Lauren section every single Saturday, Sunday. And, I just loved clothing, and I felt that clothing was something that helped to be a representation of yourself and kind of your ideology and all that stuff and self-expression. So, when I evolved as an entrepreneur, and then when I started my clothing company, it was more of like, I felt, this is in 2002, bear in mind that there was a lot of fashion at that time was more perceived as like with this very American kind of like white Americana look. And I wanted to create a brand that had like a modern sensibility, but it had more of a diverse kind of look, in terms of like the people that were in front of the brand. Because my co-founder is Indian and I'm Latin. So, two different people that came together and kind of like, brought their own ideals and stuff into the brand. So I think on that front, it was, on the fashion side, my journey into fashion was really about, me finding, things that I thought were missing in the space that I thought was cool, and or missing, for a lot of people that were my friends, right?
Sure.
And kind of what fashion evolved into for me were more, because I dress pretty crazy. So I don't wear the things, or I wear some of the things that I've made, but like I like Japanese fashion primarily, and that doesn't really sell in the United States. So, I ended up doing a lot of fashion that I thought that my friends would enjoy, because I saw their pain points and all that stuff. And despite them, you know, having high socioeconomic statuses and stuff, they just didn't like the experiences of shopping, right? So, that's where my journey kind of led in fashion. I've been super interested in CPG for the last 10 years or so. And obviously coming from fashion, there's a lot of parallels that, CPG has with fashion, right? Because in theory, fashion is a CPG product, but a lot of people refer more to CPG like, or at least in the common vernacular to food, beverage, and beauty, et cetera, where there was, again, a misrepresentation of what Latin products should be. The majority of the superfoods of the world come from the Andean region, which is Peru, Colombia, Ecuador, and Bolivia. However, a lot of those ingredients are for export. The value that brands have is usually the finished product. So in that, I took a journey back to Ecuador that I hadn't been in 14 years. And I, went kind of on like a self-discovery / exploration kind of tour of food and beverage innovators. This is now 3.5 years back in the fall of 18. And I was pretty impressed. And, me as an entrepreneur, I was never so inspired. And to me, I was like, what I think here, what the culture needs is like to create the next Goya, to do products that are good for you, the earth, and the culture. And by you, I mean the community, and like, products that I feel should be what Latin foods need to be perceived as, right? And a lot of the stereotype of Latin foods, which is unfortunately a lot of it is true, right, is like high sugar products, super condimented, and the whole nine. And again, there's this misrepresentation amongst the millennials and the Gen Zers where, we don't drink soda, we don't drink high sugar products, we prefer to consume organic products and the whole nine. But at the same time, we prefer to consume products that are, of the culture or that represent the culture, right?
Sure.
And I didn't really see a lot of products that were representing the culture in the right light. So, that's when I came down here and I found this beverage that's been around for 500 years. And it's basically a floral tea that comes from this region where I am right now, called Vilcabamba. And Vilcabamba is considered to be the Valley of Longevity, where a lot of people here are centenarians. And they've been drinking this floral tea made of flowers, herbs, mountain alkaline water, panela sugar, which is raw, unprocessed, unrefined sugar, and fruits. And they've been drinking this drink, like I said, for 500 years for immunity and for gut health. And the urban legend is every day you drink this, you live a day longer. And it comes from this region that the Andes are literally on that side and the Amazon's on that side, and it's under the equator. So it's like an insane story, right? So obviously you guys would understand this. So as a marketer, I'm like, oh, fuck, this is the fountain of youth from the middle of the world. Insane, right? You can't make this up. So then, during this time, my co-founder, he started telling me about this drink and how he has access to USD Organic Factory in the region that has a direct pipe into the mountains for the water and the whole nine. And no one's brewed and bottled this drink for the global market. It's usually more of a product that's for Ecuador or that's made in people's homes. Like I felt like, wow, I have an opportunity to align sustainability, social impact, culture, health, wellness, and community all in one. If I can do that and do it well, obviously it's a very big opportunity. The community, the culture, the planet, and Ecuador. So a big part of it too is that I want to make Ecuador cool. And a lot of people's, again, back to stereotypes, it's like, oh, Ecuador, that's the place with like the parrots and the Galapagos Islands, right? Yeah, sure, that all exists. But there's a lot of other cool shit here that when people come and see, they get fascinated over, right? Because there's no nature like this anywhere in the world just because of the latitude and longitude of where we are. A lot of that is coming out through the brand and the story and the narrative and all that. So a lot of it came out of a need that I felt that there was not a product or a brand that represented myself and the culture in the right way.
Well, we definitely want to make a charitable donation to any organization that resonates well with you. So 2 questions, actually, what would that organization be? And then 2, if there's like a lasting impression or piece of advice that you would leave with the group, whether it be entrepreneurship, passion, anything else? Definitely, if you can speak to that.
Yeah. So in terms of the organization, it's a Latin-based one about tied into education. I'm doing a lot of stuff here in Ecuador, particularly around like reforestation and all that stuff. So that's something that's a little bit newer. My default kind of charity that I always go back to is things that are tied into the progression of the Latin youth back in the United States. But I'm doing a lot of stuff tying in with foundations and NGOs and all that stuff down in Ecuador right now around climate change and reforestation and the whole nine. And then in terms of the entrepreneur part, I would say, yeah, it's just about the journey, dude. It's just about connecting all the dots, and you really have to be able to see the full picture. And it's never been easier to be an entrepreneur, but it's also never been tougher because there's so much competition, and in theory it's easy for everyone now, right? So I think just if you're out to do things for an opportunity or whatever, cool, that's one thing. Obviously you just have to be smart and get your ducks all lined in a row. But if you're passionate about changing the world and really creating an impact, it needs to be authentic, because like I'm working right now like 17, 18 hours a day, and I've never put myself through the ringer like this. But I wake up at 6, 7 in the morning and go to sleep at 1, 2 in the morning, because I'm on this relentless pursuit to make this into like a multi-billion-dollar brand, and nothing's going to stop me. So you just have to have that push, and it's either you got it or you don't, right?
So obviously, you got into clothing fashion at really kind of a golden age with people, like Nigo, Bape, all those guys in the early 2000s really just exploding. So for you, approaching branding story, why should people give a damn about your product? Obviously, there's so much more to that than just the brand. There's the marketing and the strategy behind it. But what were some ways you've noticed communicating to people a brand story that gets people excited, that gets people really to care, give a damn about your product, and like really think about why would it be different?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think it changes throughout time, right? So for instance, in the beginning, I would say first 10 years of fashion, it was more like putting the right faces and celebrities and all that stuff with the brand. That was very successful and still is successful, just depending on what you're doing. And if anything, if it isn't the primary, it definitely is a high secondary thing, whether it's fashion or consumer products. I think the biggest change that I've seen, not in the last 10 years, but more so in the last 5 years, is brand storytelling through founders and people finding connections with the founders. I think that's where, because the youth, want to have a connection with the brand and the person behind the brand, right? And it's not the person, maybe the team and all that stuff. So what we're doing different at Chiki, and the reason why I'm spending a lot of time in Ecuador, is because our whole team is based down here, with the exception of sales. So I actually have like my team literally right next to me right now, and 4 other people are filming right now as well on the farm, which is 5 minutes away. But having that team effort and like putting the, for us, it's going to end up being the team as the face of the brand. I'm going to basically take the baton and do the majority of the stuff, but still like, everyone being participatory and telling that story, because there's no one like the founder saying it, right? And there's nothing like that. And sure, I'm not going to be dancing all over TikTok and all that stuff, but like, there's still a lot of things that, I could do that are, say, TikTok friendly, that we're planning on right now and all that stuff, that are going to be super beneficial to the brand, especially when it comes to storytelling, so that people know that there's an authentic story here. So I think that's become the biggest thing. And for all the brands that I've seen to be very successful in the last few years, I would say the brands that are the most successful have a very strong opinion, say from like a founder, that has a very specific narrative of their brand. So I would say that the best person that's done that, I would say in the last 10 years is Virgil Abloh. I think, he's not a designer. He's literally like beyond that. He's, a movement, he's transcended industries, and he's done, to me, the most impressive job I've seen in like brand creation, And unfortunately, he went too soon, but like what he's created is, if anything, he created a blueprint for other people to follow. So, I see that a lot now, that a lot of people are kind of reading the book and following that, because he did it better than anyone else. And he did it so authentically. And, obviously he's an extremely smart individual, but the way that he did it and executed it was at the highest possible level. So I think if you're authentic and you're just resilient and persistent and passionate and consistent, that's how you're going to be able to make your brand different from everyone else's.